Ma'am, this is private property. Security guard Sebastian Drake's voice boomed across the marble lobby as bright afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling of Sterling Corporate Tower. He stepped directly into Vivian Holt's path, his hand resting on his radio, blocking her from the executive elevators. She wore a simple red sweater and dark jeans, her visitor's badge nowhere to be seen. Behind him, his partner Vince Callahan chuckled, adjusting his black uniform shirt with short sleeves. People like you need to use the service entrance around back, if you're here for cleaning or something. Vivian Holt shifted her leather briefcase to her other hand, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. The morning light caught the gold nameplate on the wall behind them. Washington Enterprises, Executive Offices, 47th floor. None of them had bothered to read it. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Vivian Holt stood perfectly still, her briefcase at her side, watching Sebastian Drake's self-satisfied expression. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the tower's glass ceiling illuminated every detail of the opulent marble lobby, the pristine floors, the gleaming elevator doors, and the two security guards who had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. "Excuse me?" Vivian's voice was steady, professional. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Sebastian Drake crossed his arms, his badge catching the light. His partner Vince Callahan moved closer, forming a human barrier between Vivian and the executive elevators. Both men wore identical expressions of smug authority, their black uniform shirts crisp and their radios crackling with occasional chatter from other floors. "No misunderstanding here, lady." Vince Callahan's voice carried the tone of someone who'd had this conversation before. "You don't have a visitor's badge, you're not dressed for business, and you definitely don't belong on the executive floors. Service workers check in at the loading dock." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Vivian Holt absorbed it without flinching, though something flickered behind her eyes. Not anger, but something deeper, something patient. "I'm not a service worker," she said quietly. "I have business on the executive floor." Sebastian Drake let out a short laugh. "Right, and I'm the building owner. Look, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. You?" He gestured at her casual attire. "You definitely don't." The sound of heels clicking against marble announced the arrival of Agnes Thorne, the building manager. She approached with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to solving problems quickly. Her orange blouse was perfectly pressed, her blue jacket immaculate. When she saw Vivian Holt, her expression immediately hardened. "What's the situation here?" Agnes's tone suggested she'd already made her judgment. "Trespasser, trying to access the executive floors." Sebastian Drake reported with satisfaction. "No badge, no appointment. Probably here to cause trouble." Agnes Thorne looked Vivian up and down, taking in the red sweater, the dark jeans, the briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. But she saw only what she expected to see, someone who didn't belong. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises," Agnes announced with finality. "If you have legitimate business here, you can call during normal hours and schedule an appointment through proper channels." Vivian Holt's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her briefcase handle. The afternoon light continued to pour through the glass ceiling, illuminating the nameplate on the wall that none of them had bothered to read. Washington Enterprises. The company that owned this building, that paid their salaries, that existed because of the woman standing in front of them. "I understand your confusion," Vivian said, her voice remaining unnaturally calm. "But I do have business here. Very important business, actually." Vince Callahan snorted. "Let me guess. You're here to see the CEO? Maybe you've got $1 million business proposal in that fancy bag?" "Something like that," Vivian replied, and for just a moment, something that might have been amusement crossed her face. The response seemed to irritate Sebastian Drake. "Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is a serious business building. We've got Fortune 500 companies up there, executives making decisions that affect thousands of jobs. You think they want to be bothered by every person who walks in off the street?" "You're absolutely right," Vivian agreed. They probably don't want to be bothered. But sometimes important business requires immediate attention. Agnes Thorne stepped closer, her authority evident in every gesture. Young woman, I've been managing this building for 12 years. I know every executive, every assistant, every authorized visitor. And I'm telling you right now, you are not authorized to be here. The words hit like a slap, but Vivian Holt didn't even blink. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, her expensive briefcase catching the light. Several other people in the lobby had begun to notice the commotion. A few office workers heading to lunch, a delivery driver checking his phone, a woman in a business suit who seemed uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. I appreciate your diligence, Vivian said to Agnes. Really, I do. Security is important in a building like this. But if you would just call upstairs and mention that Vivian Holt is here. Oh, so now you've got a name. Sebastian Drake interrupted with a laugh. What's next? You're going to tell us you own the place? The question hung in the air with strange weight. Vivian Holt looked directly at Sebastian Drake, and for just a moment, the confident smirk faltered on his face. There was something in her eyes, something that didn't match her casual clothes or her patient demeanor, something that spoke of boardrooms and power lunches and decisions that shaped entire industries. Would that surprise you? She asked quietly. Vince Callahan stepped forward aggressively. Okay, that's enough. Lady, I don't know if you're delusional or just trying to scam your way upstairs, but this stops now. You need to leave immediately, or we're calling the police. The police, Vivian repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. For standing in a lobby, for trespassing, Agnes Thorne declared, for attempting to gain unauthorized access to secure areas, for refusing to leave when asked by building management. The accusations were serious, delivered with the weight of authority, and backed by 3 people in uniform. Any reasonable person would have backed down, apologized, perhaps tried to explain more clearly. But Vivian Holt didn't look concerned. If anything, she looked like someone settling in for a long conversation. I see, she said thoughtfully. And you're certain that calling the police is the right course of action here? Something about her tone gave Sebastian Drake pause, but his pride had carried him too far to stop now. Absolutely certain. In fact, he reached for his radio. I'm calling them right now. Before you do that, Vivian said, her voice still maddeningly calm. Perhaps you should consider that mistakes can have consequences. Serious consequences. Agnes Thorne bristled. Are you threatening us? Not at all, Vivian replied smoothly. I'm simply observing that in a building like this, with tenants like these, it's important to be absolutely certain before making accusations, because once certain wheels are set in motion, they can be very difficult to stop. The warning was delivered so politely, so professionally, that it took a moment for its implications to sink in. When they did, Sebastian Drake's face darkened with anger. You know what? I've had enough of this. He keyed his radio with sharp, aggressive movements. Dispatch, this is Drake at Sterling Corporate Tower. I need units for a trespassing situation in the main lobby. Subject is refusing to leave and making veiled threats. The radio crackled with a response, confirming that units were en route. The sound seemed to echo off the marble walls, final and irreversible. Several people in the lobby turned to stare, some pulling out phones to record what was clearly becoming a significant incident. Vivian Holt listened to the radio exchange with apparent interest, as if she were observing something fascinating rather than facing arrest. When Sebastian Drake finished his call, she nodded approvingly. Very thorough, she commented. I appreciate attention to detail. Her composure was unnerving. Most people facing police involvement would show some sign of concern, elevated breathing, nervous gestures, attempts to de-escalate. But Vivian Holt stood as calmly as if she were waiting for an elevator, her briefcase at her side, her expression thoughtful. Vince Callahan was growing increasingly agitated.
What's wrong with you? Don't you understand what's happening here? The police are coming. You're going to be arrested.
I understand perfectly, Vivian replied. The question is, do you? Agnes Thorne checked her watch impatiently. The officers should be here in 10 minutes. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your choices. Actually, Vivian said, reaching into her briefcase. "I think I'll use that time to make a phone call." Sebastian Drake stepped forward quickly. "No sudden movements. Keep your hands where we can see them." Vivian Holt paused, her hand on her phone, and looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Mr. Drake, I'm going to give you one last chance to reconsider this situation. Look around. Really look. Think about where you are, who you work for, and whether you might be making an assumption that could change your life forever." The words carried weight that seemed to fill the marble lobby. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Sebastian Drake's face. But his pride, his 8 years of authority, his absolute certainty that he knew who belonged in this building and who didn't, all of it crashed back over him like a wave. "Make your call," he said grimly. "It won't change anything. In 10 minutes, you're going to be in handcuffs, and this will all be over." Vivian Holt smiled then, an expression that was both sad and knowing. "Mr. Drake," she said quietly, "you're absolutely right about one thing. In 10 minutes, this will definitely be over." Sebastian Drake's hand moved to his radio with deliberate authority, his short-sleeved security uniform stretching across his broad shoulders as he turned away from Vivian. The marble lobby of Sterling Corporate Tower echoed with the static crackle of his communication device under the bright afternoon sunlight streaming through the massive glass windows. "Dispatch, this is Sterling Tower Security. We have a trespassing situation in the main lobby. Individual refuses to leave the premises and is attempting unauthorized access to restricted areas." Sebastian spoke into his radio, his voice carrying across the expansive space with practiced authority. Vivian adjusted her grip on her leather briefcase, her red blazer and black slacks, impeccable despite the confrontation. The natural skylight above cast harsh shadows across her face as she maintained her composure, watching Sebastian with careful attention. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the elevators immediately," Vince Callahan commanded, positioning his stocky frame directly in front of the executive elevator bank. His green security shirt and black pants created a barrier between Vivian and her destination, his arms crossed with aggressive determination. Behind the reception desk, Brendan Chow shifted uncomfortably in her red blouse and black skirt, her fingers hovering over her computer keyboard as she watched the escalating situation. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated her concerned expression as she glanced between her work and the confrontation unfolding mere feet away. "I'd like to speak with building management, please," Vivian said calmly, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about my presence here." Agnes Thorne emerged from the management office, her red dress and black blazer announcing her authority as she approached the group. Her graying hair was pulled back severely, and her expression held the dismissive irritation of someone interrupted from important work. "I'm the building manager," Agnes declared, her voice sharp with impatience. "Security has explained the situation. You don't have proper authorization to be in this building, and you're disrupting our operations." Vivian reached into her briefcase, her movements slow and deliberate. "If I could just show you my identification and explain why I'm here." "No identification is going to change the fact that you entered this building without following proper procedures," Agnes interrupted, her tone growing more aggressive. "Security protocols exist for everyone's safety, and you violated multiple policies." Sebastian's radio crackled again as dispatch responded to his call. "Unit responding. ETA 15 minutes. Maintain visual contact with subject." The elevator chimed softly behind Vince, who immediately spun around to face it, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio. A well-dressed woman in an orange blouse and navy blazer stepped out, her professional appearance marking her as one of the building's tenants. Joyce Pennington paused as she took in the scene, her eyes moving from the security guards to Vivian, then to the tense building manager. The natural light from above highlighted her confused expression as she tried to understand the confrontation blocking her path to the exit. "Excuse me," Joyce said politely, attempting to navigate around the group. "Is everything all right here?" "Everything's under control, ma'am," Sebastian replied, without taking his eyes off Vivian. "We're handling a security matter. Please proceed to the exit." Joyce hesitated, her gaze settling on Vivian's professional appearance and calm demeanor. Something about the situation struck her as wrong. The obvious contrast between Vivian's dignified presence and the guard's aggressive posturing. "I'm sorry, but this seems unnecessarily hostile," Joyce ventured, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to speaking up. "This woman appears to be conducting herself appropriately." Vince stepped toward Joyce, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, I need you to mind your own business and exit the building. This is a security matter." "A security matter?" Joyce's voice rose with indignation. What exactly has she done wrong? Agnes moved to intercede, her red dress swishing as she positioned herself between Joyce and the guards. "This individual entered our building without proper authorization and is attempting to access restricted areas. We're handling it according to protocol." Vivian pulled out her phone, holding it steady as she began recording the interaction. The camera captured the marble walls, the expensive fixtures, and most importantly, the faces and words of everyone involved. "For the record," Vivian said clearly, her voice directed toward her phone's microphone, "I am being denied access to this building despite my legitimate business here. Multiple staff members are participating in this denial without allowing me to present proper identification." Sebastian lunged toward Vivian's phone. "You can't record in here. This is private property." "Actually," Joyce interjected, pulling out her own phone, "she has every right to document this treatment. I'm recording this as well." The lobby's security cameras hummed almost inaudibly overhead, their red recording lights blinking steadily as they captured every moment of the escalating confrontation. The sophisticated surveillance system documented each word, each gesture, each discriminatory action unfolding beneath its watchful electronic eyes. Brenda Chow leaned forward at her desk, straining to hear the conversation while pretending to work. Her red blouse caught the light as she shifted position, her discomfort with the situation evident in her fidgeting movements. "Look at the facts," Sebastian announced loudly, clearly performing for any witnesses. "No visitor badge, no appointment verification, no escort from authorized personnel. This is textbook trespassing behavior." He gestured broadly at Vivian's professional attire and briefcase. "The expensive clothes don't change the rules. Everyone follows the same procedures." Agnes nodded approvingly at Sebastian's assessment. "Exactly. We can't make exceptions based on appearance or sob stories. Security protocols protect everyone in this building." Vivian's phone continued recording as she spoke with measured calm. "And what exactly did I do that warranted immediate involvement of security rather than a simple conversation about proper procedures?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear to Joyce, who stepped closer to show her support. "That's an excellent question. What specific threatening behavior prompted this response?" Vince's face reddened under the fluorescent lighting. She was attempting to access restricted elevators without authorization. "After I explained I had business on the upper floors," Vivian added for her recording. "Anyone can claim anything," Agnes snapped. "That's why we have verification procedures." Joyce crossed her arms, her orange blouse bright under the overhead lights. "And did you allow her to go through those verification procedures?" The silence that followed Joyce's question was deafening. Sebastian and Vince exchanged glances, while Agnes's mouth opened and closed without sound. Vivian lowered her phone slightly, her fingers still on the record button. "I'd like to make a phone call, if that's permitted." "Absolutely not," Sebastian declared. "You're not conducting business while trespassing. I'm calling someone who can verify my authorization to be here," Vivian explained patiently. Agnes waved dismissively. "We're not playing games with fake references or accomplices. The police are already on their way." Several floors above, Detective Renee Sparks sat in her patrol car, reviewing the dispatch information on her mobile computer. The call details were sparse, mentioning only a trespassing incident at one of the city's most prestigious corporate addresses. She frowned as she read the location, wondering what kind of trespassing situation would occur in broad daylight at such a high-security building. Back in the lobby, Joyce moved closer to Vivian, her professional demeanor lending weight to her words. "I work in this building every day, and I've never seen security behave this aggressively toward anyone. This treatment is completely disproportionate." "Ma'am, last warning," Vince threatened, pointing toward the exit. "Leave now or you'll be included in the police report." Joyce's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you seriously threatening me for witnessing this incident?" Brenda Chow finally stood up from her desk, her red blouse visible as she moved toward the group. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, "but maybe we should just let her make a phone call. It might clear everything up." Sebastian whirled toward the reception desk. "Brenda, get back to your station. This doesn't concern you." The young receptionist retreated, but her expression showed clear disagreement with the guard's handling of the situation. She returned to her desk, but kept watching, her body language indicating she was ready to provide witness testimony if needed. Vivian looked directly at Agnes, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep within. "I'm going to make one phone call. After that conversation, I believe this entire situation will be resolved." "No phone calls," Agnes repeated firmly. "The police will sort out your claims when they arrive." Despite the prohibition, Vivian began dialing a number on her phone, her movements deliberate and confident. The number she entered was brief, clearly an internal extension rather than an outside line. Sebastian moved toward her aggressively. "I said no phone calls." Joyce stepped between them, her orange blouse bright as she blocked Sebastian's path. "She's making a phone call, not detonating a bomb. Your reaction is completely inappropriate." The phone in Vivian's hand began ringing, the sound echoing softly in the tense lobby. After 2 rings, a professional voice answered, though the specific words were too quiet for the guards to hear clearly. "This is Vivian," she said into the phone, her voice carrying easily across the marble space. "I'm in the lobby of Sterling Tower, and there seems to be some confusion about my authorization to access the executive floors." Agnes lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. "Hang up immediately." Vivian stepped smoothly away, continuing her conversation. "Yes, I think that would be appropriate. The situation has escalated beyond what I anticipated." Sebastian's radio crackled again. "Unit 7 minutes out. Any change in situation?" "Negative. Dispatch. Subject is now making unauthorized phone calls and has recruited building tenants to interfere with security procedure." Joyce threw her hands up in exasperation. "Interfere with security procedures? I'm documenting discrimination?" The mysterious phone conversation concluded with Vivian saying simply, "Thank you, I'll wait here." She ended the call and looked calmly at the assembled group, her red blazer immaculate despite the confrontation. "Someone will be down momentarily to resolve this misunderstanding." Agnes's face flushed with anger. "The only people coming down here are the police to arrest you for trespassing." But something in Vivian's tone, something in her unshakable confidence, had created a small crack in the guard's certainty. The way she'd made that internal call, the authority in her voice, the complete lack of fear or panic, began to register as inconsistent with their assumptions about her presence in the building. The lobby fell into tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the security cameras above, still recording every moment of the confrontation that was about to change everything. The glass doors of Sterling Corporate Tower slid open with a mechanical whisper, and Detective Renee Sparks stepped into the marble-clad lobby. Her black boots clicked against the polished floor as she surveyed the scene before her. Overhead fluorescent lights mixed with natural skylight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating every detail of the expensive corporate environment. The detective's trained eyes immediately cataloged the luxury surrounding her. Imported marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and mahogany-paneled walls that screamed wealth and power. Detective Sparks wore her standard-issue long-sleeved uniform, the dark fabric crisp and professional. Her badge gleamed under the bright lighting as she approached the cluster of people near the executive elevator bank. Something about this call already felt different. In her 15 years on the force, she'd responded to countless trespassing complaints, and they rarely took place in corporate towers worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Sebastian Drake immediately straightened when he spotted the detective. His security uniform, a navy blue ensemble with matching pants, suddenly felt inadequate in the presence of law enforcement. He'd been so confident moments before, so certain of his authority, but now he needed to present his case convincingly. "Detective Sparks." Sebastian approached with forced authority, his chest puffed out slightly. "I'm Sebastian Drake, head of security for this building. Thank you for responding so quickly. The detective nodded curtly, her gaze shifting between Sebastian and the woman standing calmly near the elevators. Vivian Holt hadn't moved from her position, hadn't attempted to flee or hide. She stood with quiet dignity, her red silk blouse and black tailored pants suggesting anything but criminal intent. Her leather briefcase remained at her side, and her posture conveyed the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. What seems to be the problem here? Detective Sparks asked, though her instincts were already questioning the narrative she'd received over dispatch. Sebastian gestured toward Vivian with barely concealed disdain. This woman has been attempting to gain unauthorized access to our executive floors. She has no visitor badge, no appointment, and refuses to leave when asked. She's been loitering here for over an hour, disturbing our tenants and disrupting building operations. Vince Callahan stepped forward, eager to support his supervisor's account. His security uniform matched Sebastian's, though his nervous energy contrasted sharply with his attempted authority. She claims she belongs here, detective, but anyone can see that's not the case. We've offered her multiple opportunities to leave peacefully, but she's refused to comply. Detective Sparks studied Vivian Holt more carefully. The woman's expensive clothing, professional demeanor, and calm composure didn't fit the typical profile of a trespasser. Most people caught where they didn't belong showed signs of guilt, nervousness, or aggressive defensiveness. This woman displayed none of those behaviors. Ma'am? Detective Sparks addressed Vivian directly. Can you tell me why you're here today? Vivian's voice remained steady and respectful. Detective, I came to this building on business. I've tried to explain my purpose to these gentlemen, but they've refused to listen or verify my credentials. I understand they're concerned about security, but I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Sebastian scoffed, his frustration mounting. Detective, she's been spinning stories for an hour. First she claimed she had meetings, then she said she worked here. Her story keeps changing because she's making it up as she goes. Agnes Thorne moved closer to the group, her blue jacket and orange blouse making her look official and authoritative under the bright lobby lighting. She'd been watching the situation unfold from behind the reception desk and now felt compelled to add her voice to the complaint. Detective Sparks, I'm Agnes Thorne, building manager, she said with practiced authority. I can confirm that this woman has no scheduled appointments in our system. She's not registered as a tenant, vendor, or authorized visitor. Our security protocols are very clear about unauthorized individuals, and we need her removed immediately. But Detective Sparks found herself focusing on details that didn't align with the story she was hearing. Ma'am, she said to Vivian, most people caught trespassing try to leave when confronted. Why did you stay? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the guard's narrative. Vivian smiled slightly, appreciating the detective's observational skills. Because I have every right to be here, detective. I was hoping these gentlemen would take a moment to verify that fact, rather than making assumptions based on their preconceptions. Preconceptions? Sebastian's voice rose defensively. We're following standard security protocols. This has nothing to do with assumptions and everything to do with unauthorized access. Detective Sparks raised her hand to quiet Sebastian. Something about his defensive response triggered her suspicions further. In her experience, when people got defensive about their motives, those motives were usually worth questioning. Before we proceed with any arrest, Detective Sparks said carefully, I think we should explore all options for resolving this situation. Ma'am, you mentioned credentials. Do you have identification that might clarify your business here? Vivian nodded graciously. Of course, detective. I also wonder if we might contact someone from the executive offices upstairs. I'm confident they could clear this up quickly. Agnes Thorne immediately stepped forward, her face flushed with urgency. Detective, I've already explained that our executives are unavailable. We can't disturb them with every security incident. This woman is clearly stalling, hoping to waste enough time that you'll just let her go. I'm not asking to disturb anyone, Vivian replied calmly. I'm simply suggesting that a quick verification call might save everyone considerable time and embarrassment. The word embarrassment struck Sebastian like a physical blow. His jaw tightened as he processed what this woman was implying. "Detective, she's been making veiled threats since we first approached her. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior we see from people who know they're in the wrong." But Detective Sparks was beginning to see through the security guard's presentation. Their eagerness to rush toward arrest, their resistance to simple verification steps, and their increasingly defensive explanations all raised red flags in her experienced mind. Before she could respond, the soft chime of an elevator drew everyone's attention. The private executive elevator, the one Sebastian had been so adamant about protecting, opened with a whisper of expensive engineering. Alvin Garrett stepped into the lobby, his green dress shirt and blue jacket impeccable under the bright lighting. As Vivian Holt's executive assistant, he commanded respect throughout the Washington Enterprises organization. His muscular frame and confident bearing spoke of someone accustomed to authority, though his expression quickly shifted to confusion as he took in the scene before him. His eyes swept across the group, taking in the police detective, the agitated security guards, and the building manager. But when his gaze landed on Vivian Holt, his expression transformed completely. Shock, concern, and something approaching panic flashed across his features in rapid succession. "What in the world is going on here?" Alvin's voice carried the authority of someone who rarely had to repeat himself. Sebastian immediately moved to intercept him, stepping between Alvin and the group. "Sir, this is a security matter. Please return to the elevators and allow us to handle this situation." But Alvin Garrett wasn't some nervous tenant to be dismissed by building security. His position in the corporate hierarchy gave him authority that Sebastian Drake couldn't comprehend, much less challenge. He looked past the guard toward Vivian Holt, his concern deepening. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Alvin asked, his voice filled with deference that struck everyone present like lightning. The level of respect in his tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a stranger offering casual assistance to someone in distress. This was someone who knew exactly who Vivian Holt was, and his recognition sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Sebastian felt his certainty begin to crack, but his prejudice wouldn't allow him to accept what his eyes and ears were telling him. "Sir, please step back. This woman has been trespassing, and we're handling the situation with law enforcement." "Trespassing?" Alvin's voice carried disbelief that bordered on horror. He looked at Detective Sparks with growing urgency. "Officer, I think there's been a serious mistake here." Vince Callahan moved to support his supervisor, though his own confidence was beginning to waver. "We don't know who you are, sir. This is a security matter, and we need everyone to maintain distance from the suspect." "Suspect?" Alvin Garrett's voice rose with indignation that everyone in the lobby could hear. His muscular frame tensed as he processed what was happening. "Do any of you have any idea who this woman is?" Agnes Thorne stepped forward, determined to maintain control of the narrative. "Sir, whoever you are, you're interfering with a legitimate security investigation. This woman has no authorization to be in this building." Detective Sparks watched the exchange with growing fascination. The man who'd just arrived clearly recognized Vivian Holt, and his level of deference suggested a relationship that completely contradicted the guard's story. Her instincts, already questioning the trespassing narrative, now screamed that something was fundamentally wrong with this entire situation. "Sir," Detective Sparks addressed Alvin directly, "can you identify yourself and explain your connection to this situation?" Before Alvin could respond, Sebastian made a critical error. His prejudice and desperation to maintain control overrode his judgment, and he physically stepped in front of Alvin, blocking his path to Vivian Holt. "Nobody moves until we sort this out," Sebastian declared, his hand hovering near his security radio. "I don't care who any of you claim to be. I'm head of security for this building, and I'm maintaining order until the detective completes her investigation." The moment Sebastian's hand moved toward his radio, Alvin Garrett's expression hardened into something approaching fury. His executive authority, earned through years of managing corporate crises and commanding respect from CEOs and board members, wasn't something he would allow a prejudiced security guard to dismiss. Detective Sparks recognized the dangerous escalation building in front of her. The security guards were clearly in over their heads, The building manager seemed determined to support their mistakes, and the executive who just arrived appeared ready to unleash consequences that would devastate everyone involved. But it was Vivian Holt's continued calm that struck her most powerfully. Throughout this entire ordeal, the supposed trespasser had maintained dignity, offered reasonable solutions, and demonstrated a level of confidence that suggested she held cards no one else could see. As tension filled the marble lobby like electricity before a storm, Detective Sparks realized she was about to witness something extraordinary. The security guards' world was about to collapse, and their prejudice had blinded them so completely that they still couldn't see the disaster rushing toward them. Alvin Garrett's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. What exactly is going on here? His tone carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, and his green dress shirt and blue jacket marked him as executive-level management. Sebastian Drake turned toward the newcomer, his short-sleeved police-style uniform suddenly feeling less authoritative. "Sir, we have a trespassing situation. This individual refuses to leave the premises and has been causing a disturbance." "A disturbance?" Alvin Garrett's eyebrows rose as he took in the scene. His gaze moved from the imposing security guard to Vivian Holt, who stood with quiet dignity despite the chaos surrounding her. "I see a woman with a briefcase standing calmly in our lobby." Vince Callahan stepped forward, his orange security shirt wrinkled from the morning's confrontation. "She claims she has business upstairs, but she has no visitor badge, no appointment, and she's been argumentative with building staff." Detective Renee Sparks observed the exchange with growing interest. Something about the dynamic felt off. In her red uniform blouse, she commanded attention as she studied each person's body language. The alleged trespasser showed no signs of guilt or nervousness, while the security guards seemed increasingly agitated. "I'm Alvin Garrett, executive assistant to the CEO of Washington Enterprises," he announced, producing his corporate identification card. "And I'm asking why you're detaining someone in our building without allowing them to state their business." Agnes Thorne stepped between Alvin Garrett and Vivian Holt, her blue jacket buttoned tightly as if it could protect her from the shifting atmosphere. "Mr. Garrett, with all due respect, this woman has been disruptive since she arrived. She's clearly trying to manipulate the situation, and now she's apparently manipulating you as well." Vivian Holt spoke for the first time since the detective's arrival, her voice steady and professional. "I appreciate your intervention, Mr. Garrett. Perhaps you could escort me to the executive floor, where this misunderstanding can be resolved quickly." "Absolutely," Alvin Garrett replied, moving toward the elevator bank. "There's no reason this situation should have escalated to police involvement." Sebastian Drake positioned himself between them and the elevators, his muscular frame blocking their path. "Nobody goes anywhere until we sort this out. I don't care who you are. I have authority over all building access, and I'm not letting some smooth-talking executive get fooled by a professional con artist." The lobby had grown quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lighting overhead and the distant sound of street traffic filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Natural skylight streamed down from the glass ceiling, illuminating the marble floors where this corporate drama was unfolding. Detective Renee Sparks recognized the moment when intervention became necessary. "Everyone needs to calm down. I'm going to need to see identification from all parties involved before we proceed further." She turned to Vivian Holt first. "Ma'am, may I see some form of ID, please?" Vivian Holt reached into her briefcase with deliberate, measured movements. She withdrew a leather wallet and extracted her identification card, handing it to the detective with the same composed demeanor she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Detective Renee Sparks examined the ID carefully, and her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The name clearly read Vivian Washington. She glanced up at the massive corporate logo behind the reception desk, where Washington Enterprises was displayed in gleaming letters. "Washington," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Brenda Chow, who had been watching from behind the reception desk, leaned forward slightly. Even from her position, she could see the name on the identification card, and her eyes widened with dawning realization. Vince Callahan noticed the detective's pause and laughed dismissively. Oh, what a coincidence. Same name as the company. How convenient. I suppose she's going to claim she owns the building next. Agnes Thorne nodded vigorously. Exactly. It's obviously a fake ID, or she changed her name specifically to run this kind of scam. We see this all the time in corporate buildings. But Detective Renee Sparks wasn't so easily convinced. She had been a police officer long enough to recognize when pieces of a puzzle weren't fitting together properly. She looked more carefully at the woman standing before her, noting the quality of her clothing, the expensive briefcase, the confident posture despite being surrounded by hostile building staff. Ma'am? Detective Renee Sparks said, addressing Vivian Holt directly. What exactly is your business in this building? I came for an unannounced inspection of our facilities. Vivian Holt replied calmly. I own this building, Detective. I founded Washington Enterprises 32 years ago, and I built this corporate tower as our headquarters. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ambient sounds of the busy lobby seemed muted as everyone processed her words. Sebastian Drake recovered first, his voice rising with indignation. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's completely delusional. Ma'am, you can't just walk into a building and claim you own it. That's not how reality works. The ID could be fake, Agnes Thorne added quickly, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Anyone can have fake identification made. The fact that she has the same last name as the company actually makes it more suspicious, not less. Alvin Garrett, however, was staring at Vivian Holt with a different expression entirely. As the executive assistant to the CEO, he had access to information that building security and management didn't. He knew exactly who founded Washington Enterprises. He had seen photographs in corporate reports and executive briefings. Detective, he said carefully, I think there may be a significant misunderstanding here. Detective Renee Sparks was already forming the same conclusion. She handed the ID back to Vivian Holt and pulled out her radio. Dispatch, I need you to patch me through to the administrative offices of Washington Enterprises. I need to speak with someone in executive management immediately. That won't be necessary, Alvin Garrett said, reaching for his cell phone. I'll call Mr. Weston directly. Sebastian Drake's confidence finally began to waver. Wait, why are you calling the CEO? This woman is a trespasser. We're handling this according to protocol. Your protocol, Detective Renee Sparks observed, seems to have some significant flaws. As Alvin Garrett dialed, Vivian Holt remained silent, allowing the situation to unfold naturally. She had learned long ago that truth had its own power, and that sometimes the most effective strategy was simply to let others discover reality at their own pace. The phone call connected, and Alvin Garrett's voice carried clearly in the marble lobby. Mr. Weston, this is Alvin. We have an emergency situation in the main lobby. I need you to come down immediately. An emergency? Clifford Weston's voice was audible through the phone's speaker. What kind of emergency? Alvin Garrett glanced around at the assembled group before responding. Security has detained Miss Washington in the lobby and called the police. They're treating her as a trespasser. The silence from the phone was profound and telling. When Clifford Weston finally spoke, his voice carried a tone that made everyone in the lobby straighten unconsciously. They did what? Agnes Thorne stepped closer to Alvin Garrett, her face pale beneath the bright lobby lighting. Who is he talking to? What's going on? Detective Renee Sparks watched the interplay with professional interest. She had investigated enough cases to recognize the moment when a situation revealed its true nature. The security guard's bluster was beginning to crumble. The building manager's certainty was wavering, and the executive assistant was treating the supposed trespasser with a level of deference that spoke volumes. I'll be right down, Clifford Weston said through the phone, and the connection ended. Vince Callahan looked between Sebastian Drake and Agnes Thorne, seeking reassurance that was no longer forthcoming. This is all just a big show, right? They're trying to intimidate us into backing down. But Sebastian Drake was no longer responding with his earlier confidence. The security supervisor's training kicked in, and he began to consider what would happen if they had made a mistake, a big mistake. The kind of mistake that ended careers and resulted in lawsuits. Vivian Holt checked her watch calmly. Mr. Weston should be here shortly. He's very efficient. Detective Renee Sparks found herself in the unusual position of investigating what appeared to be a case of corporate discrimination rather than trespassing. She made a mental note to document everything carefully, knowing that whatever was about to unfold would likely require detailed reporting. The elevator chimed, and all eyes turned toward the executive bank. The first crack in the security team's confidence had become a chasm, and everyone in the lobby could sense that the fundamental dynamics of the situation were about to shift dramatically. Brenda Chow whispered to a colleague behind the reception desk, "I think we're about to witness something unprecedented." As footsteps echoed from the elevator area, Vivian Holt straightened her shoulders and prepared for vindication while Sebastian Drake and his colleagues faced the dawning realization that their world was about to change forever. The elevator chime cut through the tense atmosphere like a blade. All eyes turned toward the executive elevator as polished steel doors slid open with mechanical precision. The man who emerged moved with the swift urgency of someone whose world had just tilted off its axis. Clifford Weston, Chief Executive Officer of Washington Enterprises, stepped into the marble lobby wearing a charcoal gray suit and burgundy tie. His usually perfectly styled silver hair showed signs of hasty finger combing, and his face carried the expression of a man racing against disaster. At 55, he commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, but right now he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His eyes immediately found Vivian Holt standing near the security desk, still flanked by Detective Renee Sparks and the increasingly nervous building staff. The transformation in Clifford's demeanor was instant and unmistakable. His shoulders straightened into a posture of deep respect, his head bowed slightly, and he approached with the careful deference reserved for royalty. "Miss Holt," Clifford said, his voice carrying across the lobby with crystal clarity, "I cannot begin to express my apologies for this situation." The effect of those words was electric. Sebastian Drake's face went slack with confusion, his dark eyes darting between the impeccably dressed CEO and the black woman he'd been treating like a criminal. Vince Callahan took an involuntary step backward, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. Agnes Thorne's clipboard clattered to the marble floor. Detective Renee Sparks straightened, her trained instincts immediately recognizing the seismic shift in the room's dynamics. Her brown eyes narrowed as she processed the CEO's obvious deference to the woman these security guards had insisted was a trespasser. "What the hell is going on here?" Sebastian demanded, his voice cracking slightly. The confident authority he'd wielded just moments before crumbled as he watched the building's highest executive treat his supposed criminal like visiting dignitary. "Sir, this woman has been trying to access restricted areas without proper authorization. We've been following standard protocol." Clifford turned toward Sebastian with the kind of cold stare that had made hostile corporate takeovers quake. His blue eyes held no warmth, no understanding, no patience. "Standard protocol? Mr. Drake, do you have any idea who you've been harassing for the past 30 minutes? "She's a trespasser," Vince interjected desperately, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool lobby air. "She couldn't produce a visitor's badge or any legitimate business credentials. We were protecting the building's security." Vivian remained perfectly composed throughout this exchange, her designer purse held calmly in one hand, her posture radiating the quiet confidence of someone watching inevitable justice unfold. She said nothing, but her dark eyes held the patient wisdom of someone who had built empires and weathered far worse storms than this. Clifford's laugh held no humor whatsoever. "Protecting the building's security? From the woman who owns this building? From the founder and majority shareholder of Washington Enterprises? From the person who signs both your paychecks?" The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Detective Renee Sparks felt the blood drain from her face as the full scope of the situation became crystal clear. She'd been called to arrest one of the most powerful business leaders in the Pacific Northwest. The responding officer's report would be scrutinized, dissected, and probably studied in police academies as an example of how prejudice could blind law enforcement to obvious truth. "That's impossible," Sebastian whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was mounting around him like floodwater, and he was drowning in the realization of his catastrophic mistake. She didn't have any identification. She was dressed casually. She couldn't possibly be Miss Vivian Holt, Clifford announced formally, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Founded Washington Enterprises 23 years ago, with a $2,000 loan and a business plan she wrote on her kitchen table. She built this company from nothing into a multinational corporation worth billions. She personally selected the architect for this building, approved every floor plan, and cut the ribbon at the grand opening 5 years ago. Agnes Thorne's face had gone completely white. The building manager who had supported the security guard's discrimination now understood she had just participated in humiliating her ultimate employer. Her hands trembled as she bent to retrieve her fallen clipboard, her mind racing through the catastrophic implications for her career. Every executive in this building reports directly or indirectly to Miss Holt. Clifford continued, his voice gaining strength as he documented the scope of Sebastian's error. Every security protocol you claim to follow was implemented under her authority. Every policy you've supposedly been enforcing exists because she approved it. Vince made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. We were following standard security procedures. Anyone without proper identification gets treated the same way. We didn't know who she was supposed to be. Detective Renee Sparks found her voice. But you made assumptions about who she was based on her appearance, didn't you? I've been listening to your statements for the past 15 minutes, and I haven't heard you describe any actual security threats. The detective's training had taught her to read people, and she was reading Sebastian Drake like an open book. His earlier confidence had been built on prejudice and assumption, not legitimate security concerns. A real trespasser would have fled when confronted. A genuine criminal would never have calmly requested to speak with building management or patiently endured police involvement. I want to see the security footage, Detective Renee Sparks announced. All of it, from the moment Ms. Holt entered this building. Agnes Thorne's voice came out as barely a whisper. The cameras have been recording everything. Another elevator chime announced the arrival of Security Supervisor Mitch Lawson. The burly man in his late 50s wore the navy blue uniform of senior security personnel, his broad shoulders filling out his long-sleeved shirt as he surveyed the scene with growing alarm. His weathered face, marked by 20 years of military service before joining corporate security, immediately assessed the disaster unfolding in his building. Mitch's eyes took in the CEO's presence, the police officer's grim expression, the pale faces of his subordinates, and the composed black woman at the center of it all. His extensive experience told him this was the kind of incident that ended careers and generated lawsuits. Mr. Lawson, Clifford addressed him directly. I need you to review all security footage from the past hour immediately. Pay particular attention to any verbal interactions between your staff and Miss Holt. Mitch nodded curtly and approached the security station's computer terminal. His thick fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising dexterity as he accessed the building's comprehensive camera system. Multiple screens flickered to life, showing different angles of the lobby from the past 60 minutes. The footage was damning. On screen, they watched Sebastian Drake block Vivian's path to the elevator bank. The audio captured his dismissive tone as he directed her towards service entrances. They heard Vince Callahan's assumptions about her purpose in the building. His suggestions that she was looking for cleaning work or food service employment. Agnes Thorne visibly cringed as her own voice emerged from the speakers, supporting the guard's discrimination and refusing to contact executive management. Her earlier authority now looked like complicity in systematic bias. Turn up the audio on Section 4, Detective Renee Sparks requested, making notes in her report pad. The speakers crackled as Mitch adjusted the volume. Sebastian's voice came through clearly. People like you need to understand that you can't just walk into corporate buildings expecting to be treated like you belong here. The words hung in the air like toxic gas. Vince's voice followed. She probably thought she could talk her way past security. They always try to act like they're important. Detective Renee Sparks stopped writing and looked directly at both guards. Can you explain to me what you meant by people like you, and they always try? Sebastian's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. The footage had captured not just his actions, but the discriminatory mindset driving those actions. His earlier claims about following protocol crumbled under the weight of his own recorded words. Clifford's jaw tightened as he listened to his employee's casual bigotry. "Continue playing the footage, Mr. Lawson." They watched Vivian's patient attempts to explain her legitimate business in the building. They heard her calm requests to contact executive management. They witnessed her dignified responses to increasingly hostile treatment. Throughout the entire recording, she never raised her voice, never lost composure, never resorted to the aggressive behavior that would have justified the security response. "She's been nothing but professional," Detective Renee Sparks observed aloud. "Even when you threatened to have her arrested, she remained respectful and cooperative." Alvin Garrett stepped forward from where he'd been watching near the elevator bank. His black suit and green tie looked immaculate despite his obvious stress, and his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to boardroom presentations. "Ms. Holt has been the most patient person in this situation," he stated clearly. "I've worked as her executive assistant for 8 years, and I've never seen her treat anyone with anything less than complete respect, regardless of their position or background." Mitch continued scrolling through camera angles, his expression growing darker as he documented the systematic nature of the discrimination. Multiple staff members had participated or enabled the harassment. The footage showed a pattern of bias that went far beyond individual prejudice. "This isn't just about following protocol," he announced grimly. "This is documented discrimination by multiple employees against the building's owner." Agnes Thorne sank into a nearby chair. Her earlier authority completely evaporated. The building manager, who had confidently supported the guard's actions, now faced the reality that she had participated in humiliating the one person who could end her career with a single phone call. Sebastian made one final desperate attempt at denial. "We couldn't have known who she was. She was dressed casually. She didn't announce herself properly. How were we supposed to recognize someone we'd never met?" Clifford's response was swift and brutal. "Mr. Drake, Miss Holt's photograph hangs in the executive conference room. Her biography appears on our company website. Her face has been featured in Fortune magazine, Forbes, and Businessweek. Your failure to recognize her says more about your attention to the company you work for than it does about her appearance." Detective Renee Sparks closed her notepad with a snap. The evidence was overwhelming. The discrimination was documented, and the scope of the mistake was becoming clearer by the minute. She'd responded to what she thought was a standard trespassing call, and instead found herself in the middle of a civil rights incident involving one of the region's most prominent business leaders. Vivian finally spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "Detective Sparks, I appreciate your professionalism throughout this situation. You conducted yourself with the integrity I would expect from law enforcement." The detective nodded gratefully, recognizing that Vivian was distinguishing between her professional behavior and the discriminatory actions that had necessitated police involvement in the first place. "Mr. Weston," Vivian continued, addressing her CEO directly, "I think we need to have a comprehensive discussion about security protocols and cultural sensitivity training across all Washington Enterprise properties." Clifford nodded immediately. "Absolutely, Ms. Holt. This incident has revealed systematic issues that require immediate attention and long-term reform." Sebastian and Vince stood frozen, watching their careers disintegrate in real time. The security footage had captured not just their actions but their motivations, not just their words but their assumptions. There would be no appeal, no second chances, no opportunity to claim misunderstanding. Mitch Lawson began documenting everything for his incident report, knowing that this would be the most significant security failure in the building's history. His own oversight of these guards would come under scrutiny, and comprehensive changes would follow. The marble lobby that had witnessed such discrimination just an hour earlier now hummed with the energy of inevitable transformation. Justice was arriving, and it would reshape everything. The marble lobby of Sterling Corporate Tower fell into a stunned silence as Vivian Holt reached into her red leather briefcase with deliberate precision. Detective Renee Sparks watched intently, her hand resting on her utility belt, while Security Supervisor Mitch Lawson stood frozen beside the security desk, his muscular frame tense under his short-sleeved uniform. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast sharp shadows across the polished floor, illuminating every face in the crowd that had gathered to witness this unprecedented confrontation. Vivian Holt withdrew a leather portfolio embossed with the Washington Enterprises logo, her movements calm and purposeful, despite the chaos that had erupted around her. She opened it to reveal official documents bearing corporate seals, government stamps, and legal authentication marks that gleamed under the bright overhead fluorescent lighting. Her red blazer and matching skirt remained immaculate despite the ordeal she had endured at the hands of Sebastian Drake and his accomplices. "Detective Sparks," Vivian Holt said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "I am Vivian Holt, founder and majority owner of Washington Enterprises, which owns this building and 47 other commercial properties across the metropolitan area." She handed over her corporate identification card, the heavy cardstock bearing holographic security features and executive-level clearance codes. Detective Renee Sparks examined the credentials with growing amazement, her green uniform shirt reflecting the natural skylight as she moved. The identification matched perfectly with the nameplate visible on the building directory, and the accompanying ownership documents bore official county recorder stamps dating back 15 years. Her expression shifted from professional skepticism to horrified recognition as the magnitude of what had transpired became undeniably clear. Sebastian Drake's face drained of color beneath his security uniform, the short sleeves of his shirt revealing arms that trembled with the realization of his catastrophic mistake. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. "She can't be. I mean, look at her. She doesn't belong here." Security Supervisor Mitch Lawson moved swiftly to the monitoring station, his muscular physique evident as he leaned over the control panel to access the security footage from the past hour. The high-definition screens flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear recordings of every interaction that had taken place in the lobby. His jaw clenched as he watched Sebastian Drake's discriminatory statements play back with damning clarity. "Get me the audio from camera 7, Mitch Lawson commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of impending consequences. The speakers crackled to life, broadcasting Sebastian Drake's earlier words for everyone in the lobby to hear. "People like you need to use the service entrance. This area is for legitimate business visitors only." Vince Callahan backed against the marble wall, his secondary security badge catching the light as his world crumbled around him. The footage showed him blocking elevator access while making dismissive gestures toward Vivian Holt, his complicity in the discrimination now preserved in digital permanence. His orange shirt, visible beneath his blue security jacket, was damp with perspiration as panic set in. Agnes Thorne, the building manager, stood motionless beside the reception desk, her elderly frame seeming to shrink within her blue jacket as she processed the career-ending implications of her actions. The footage clearly showed her supporting the security guard's discrimination and dismissing Vivian Holt's attempts to explain her presence in the building. Detective Renee Sparks approached Vivian Holt with visible remorse, her professional demeanor tempered by genuine contrition. "Miss Washington, I owe you a profound apology on behalf of the Metropolitan Police Department. We responded to a false report and became unwitting participants in your mistreatment. This should never have happened." Vivian Holt accepted the apology with gracious dignity, though her eyes held the steely resolve of someone who had built an empire from nothing and wouldn't allow injustice to stand unchallenged. "Detective, I appreciate your professionalism and your willingness to see the truth. The fault lies not with your response, but with those who chose to see criminality where none existed." Receptionist Brenda Chow stepped forward from behind her desk, her red blouse bright under the fluorescent lighting as she addressed the gathering. "I witnessed everything that happened here today," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension surrounding her. Miss Washington conducted herself with complete professionalism while being subjected to discriminatory treatment based solely on assumptions about her appearance. Joyce Pennington, the tenant who had earlier spoken in Vivian Holt's defense, moved closer to the group, her red dress and confident bearing marking her as someone unafraid to speak truth to power. "I've been a tenant in this building for 8 years, and I've never seen such disgraceful behavior from building staff." Ms. Washington showed remarkable grace under pressure that would have broken lesser individuals. Security Supervisor Mitch Lawson turned from the monitors, his face grim as he addressed his subordinates. The muscular supervisor's short-sleeved uniform revealed arms crossed in disappointment and barely contained anger. Sebastian Drake, Vince Callahan, you are both terminated from Washington Enterprises Security effective immediately. Your badges, radios, and access cards are to be surrendered now. Sebastian Drake's protests echoed off the marble walls as he fumbled with his security equipment. You can't do this. We were following protocol. How were we supposed to know she owned the building? His desperate attempts to justify his actions only served to highlight his complete failure to understand the gravity of his discrimination. Vince Callahan silently removed his security badge, his orange shirt visible as he shrugged off his blue jacket in defeat. The secondary guard's complicity in the harassment had been thoroughly documented, and his termination was as inevitable as sunrise. The weight of his actions settled on his shoulders as he realized the consequences of his prejudiced assumptions. Agnes Thorne approached Vivian Holt with faltering steps, her elderly frame seeming fragile under the bright lobby lighting. Miss Washington, I don't know what to say. I made terrible assumptions and supported discriminatory actions. My position here is clearly untenable. Her blue jacket hung loosely on her diminished form as the reality of her situation became apparent. Vivian Holt regarded the building manager with measured consideration, her red blazer a stark contrast to Agnes Thorne's defeated posture. Your actions today revealed serious problems with building management and staff training. These issues require immediate attention and comprehensive reform. Detective Renee Sparks completed her documentation of the incident, her green shirt and blue jacket reflecting the natural skylight as she moved through the lobby gathering witness statements. The police report would serve as official confirmation of the discrimination that had occurred, providing legal foundation for any future proceedings. CEO Clifford Weston remained at Vivian Holt's side, his presence serving as visible proof of her authority within the organization. His executive bearing and obvious deference to Vivian Holt left no doubt about the corporate hierarchy, even as terminated security personnel continued their futile attempts to challenge reality. Executive Assistant Alvin Garrett coordinated with building communications to ensure that word of the incident and its resolution reached all relevant parties. His efficient management of the crisis demonstrated the professional standards expected throughout Washington Enterprises, standards that had been so dramatically violated by the security team. The legal implications of the discrimination began to crystallize as Vivian Holt made a phone call to the corporate legal department. Within minutes, senior attorneys were en route to the building to document the incident and assess potential liability issues. The systematic nature of the discrimination suggested broader organizational problems requiring comprehensive legal review. Tenant Joyce Pennington provided her contact information to Detective Renee Sparks, ensuring that her witness testimony would be available for any future proceedings. Her willingness to speak up during the initial confrontation had demonstrated moral courage that stood in sharp contrast to the cowardice displayed by building staff. Receptionist Brendan Chow compiled a detailed written statement describing everything she had observed, her account corroborating Vivian Holt's version of events and highlighting the discriminatory assumptions made by security personnel. Her professionalism throughout the incident would be noted in her personnel file as exemplary conduct under difficult circumstances. Security Supervisor Mitch Lawson began the process of securing terminated employees' access credentials, his muscular frame tense with the responsibility of damage control. The comprehensive security breach represented by his subordinates' actions required immediate systematic review of all personnel and procedures. As the immediate crisis management continued, Vivian Holt maintained her composed demeanor while internally processing the profound disappointment of discovering such systemic discrimination within her own organization. The red leather briefcase that had contained proof of her identity now held documentation of a corporate culture failure requiring extensive remediation. Detective Renee Sparks prepared to file her report with the understanding that this incident would likely trigger broader departmental review of response protocols for discrimination calls. The police involvement in what amounted to harassment of a prominent business owner created liability issues extending beyond the corporate environment. The afternoon sunlight continued to stream through the tower's windows, illuminating a lobby transformed from a scene of discrimination into a space where justice was finally being served. The bright fluorescent lighting cast no shadows on the truth that had emerged, leaving the perpetrators of harassment exposed and accountable for their actions. Sebastian Drake and Vince Callahan gathered their personal belongings under the watchful eyes of security supervisor Mitch Lawson, their terminated status now a permanent stain on their employment records. The discrimination they had perpetrated against Vivian Holt would follow them as they sought future employment in an increasingly connected professional world. The reckoning that had begun in Sterling Corporate Tower's lobby represented more than individual consequences for discriminatory behavior. It marked the beginning of systematic organizational change, designed to ensure that no one would ever again face the harassment and humiliation that Vivian Holt had endured simply for entering a building she owned. As legal counsel arrived and witness statements were completed, the foundation was being laid for comprehensive reforms that would transform not just this building, but the entire Washington Enterprises organization. The immediate justice being served to the perpetrators of discrimination was only the beginning of a much larger transformation that would honor the dignity of every individual who entered these premises. The executive boardroom on the 42nd floor of Sterling Corporate Tower had never felt more charged with purpose. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the polished mahogany table in natural daylight, while overhead fluorescent lighting ensured every face around the room remained clearly visible. Vivian Holt sat at the head of the table, her red blouse and dark slacks a striking contrast against the neutral tones of the corporate space. Her briefcase lay open before her, documents organized with military precision. Security supervisor Mitch Lawson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his orange polo shirt damp with perspiration despite the controlled climate. Building operations manager Rita Chen sat to his right, her green blouse wrinkled from the stress of the past few hours. Detective Renee Sparks occupied a chair near the window, her blue police uniform with short sleeves reflecting the afternoon light as she reviewed her notes from the lobby incident. CEO Clifford Weston entered the boardroom, followed closely by executive assistant Alvin Garrett, who carried a thick folder of personnel files. Weston's blue jacket hung perfectly over his white dress shirt, while Garrett wore a green button-down with khaki trousers. The weight of the situation showed in both men's expressions. "Thank you all for responding so quickly to this emergency meeting," Vivian Holt began, her voice carrying the authority that came with building an empire from nothing. What happened in our lobby today was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem that has been festering in our organization. She opened her laptop and projected security footage onto the wall-mounted screen. The images showed various incidents from different Washington Enterprise properties over the past year. Black tenants being questioned unnecessarily, Hispanic maintenance workers being followed by security, Asian executives being asked for additional identification that white counterparts never faced. Mitch Lawson's face went pale as he recognized several of his trained guards in the footage. "Miss Washington, I had no idea the scope was this extensive." "That's part of the problem, Mitch. You had no idea because these incidents were dismissed, minimized, or ignored entirely. The pattern of discrimination we witnessed today with Sebastian Drake and Vince Callahan represents a failure of our entire system." Detective Sparks leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. "From a law enforcement perspective, I can tell you that we've responded to at least 6 similar calls from Washington Enterprise properties in the past 18 months. Each time, we were told by building management that suspicious individuals were trespassing or causing disturbances." Vivian Holt nodded grimly. "And how many of those suspicious individuals turned out to be legitimate tenants, employees, or visitors?" "All of them," Detective Sparks admitted. "Every single one." Rita Chen spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I received dozens of reports from security guards about people who didn't belong in our buildings. I never thought to question the pattern of who was being reported. That's exactly the unconscious bias we need to address," Vivian Holt replied. "We've created an environment where certain people are automatically viewed as threats or outsiders, regardless of their actual business in our buildings." CEO Clifford Weston opened his folder and spread several documents across the table. "I've been reviewing our employee handbook and training materials. Our security protocols make no mention of cultural sensitivity or implicit bias awareness. The training focuses entirely on physical security threats, which explains how guards like Drake and Callahan could justify their actions." Alvin Garrett added, They genuinely believed they were protecting the building, never recognizing that their definition of suspicious was deeply flawed. Vivian Holt stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the city below. I built Washington Enterprises to create opportunities, not barriers. Every property we own, every business we operate, should reflect values of inclusion and respect. Today's incident proves we've lost sight of that mission. She returned to the table and pulled out a thick document labeled Comprehensive Reform Initiative. Effective immediately, we're implementing sweeping changes across all Washington Enterprise properties. First, every security guard, building manager, and customer service representative will complete 40 hours of cultural competency training within the next 60 days. Mitch Lawson nodded eagerly. I can coordinate with training vendors to begin scheduling sessions next week. Second, Vivian Holt continued, we're establishing an independent oversight committee to review all security incidents involving people of color. Any pattern of discriminatory behavior will result in immediate termination. Rita Chen raised her hand tentatively. What about existing staff who've been involved in questionable incidents? I'm glad you asked. Vivian Holt opened another folder and pulled out several termination letters. Sebastian Drake and Vince Callahan are banned from all Washington Enterprise properties permanently. Their termination letters detail every discriminatory statement and action captured on today's security footage. She handed copies to everyone at the table. The documents were thorough, citing specific examples of racial profiling, unprofessional conduct, and violation of company values. Detective Sparks reviewed the termination letters carefully. These are well-documented cases of workplace discrimination. I'll be recommending that our department implement new protocols for responding to discrimination calls. What kind of protocols? Weston asked. When we receive reports of trespassing or suspicious activity, we'll require building management to provide specific behavior-based justifications. No more responding to calls based on someone's appearance or assumptions about who belongs where. Vivian Holt smiled for the first time since entering the boardroom. That's exactly the kind of systemic change we need. Individual accountability paired with institutional reform. She turned to Rita Chen, whose nervous fidgeting had not gone unnoticed. Rita, your role as building operations manager puts you at the center of these interactions. I need to know you understand the seriousness of what happened today. I do, Miss Washington. I realize now that I enabled discriminatory behavior by accepting security reports without question. I should have investigated the patterns earlier. Recognition is the first step toward change. You'll be working directly with our new Director of Inclusion and Equity to redesign our incident reporting procedures. Alvin Garrett opened his laptop and began typing. I'm drafting a corporate-wide memo to address today's incident and announce the new policies. Should I include specifics about the lobby situation? Absolutely. Transparency is crucial for rebuilding trust. Every employee needs to understand that discrimination will not be tolerated at any level of our organization. Vivian Holt moved to the whiteboard and began outlining additional reforms. We're also implementing monthly sensitivity audits, anonymous reporting systems for discriminatory behavior, and diversity metrics that will be tied to management bonuses. Mitch Lawson looked up from his notes. What about Agnes Thorne? As building manager, she was directly complicit in today's incident. Agnes is being demoted to assistant manager and will complete 100 hours of diversity training. She'll remain on probation for 1 year. Any future incidents will result in termination. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the changes sank in. Detective Sparks closed her notepad and looked directly at Vivian Holt. I want to apologize again for the police department's role in today's discrimination. We responded to a call without properly assessing the situation. Your apology is appreciated, Detective, but apologies without action are meaningless. What concrete steps will your department take to prevent similar incidents? I'm recommending mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, revised protocols for discrimination calls, and partnership with community organizations to improve police-community relations. CEO Weston stood and walked to the window. Vivian, the financial cost of implementing these changes across all our properties will be substantial. Training, oversight, new personnel, revised procedures. Clifford, what's the cost of losing our reputation? What's the cost of perpetuating systems that harm the very communities we serve? What's the cost of allowing talented people to be excluded from opportunities because of prejudice? Her voice carried the passion that had driven her from poverty to billionaire status. We didn't build this company to maximize profits at the expense of human dignity. We built it to prove that success and integrity can coexist. Alvin Garrett finished typing and looked up. The corporate memo is ready for your review. It acknowledges the incident, takes full responsibility, outlines the new policies, and commits to ongoing transparency about our progress. Vivian Holt reviewed the document quickly, making several additions to strengthen the language about accountability. Send this to every employee within the hour. I want everyone to understand that our company culture is changing, starting today. Rita Chen spoke up hesitantly. Ms. Washington, some employees might resist these changes. They might view the new training and oversight as punishment for something they didn't do. Then they clearly need the training more than anyone else. Change is never comfortable, Rita, but it's necessary. Anyone who can't embrace a workplace built on respect and inclusion doesn't belong at Washington Enterprises. Detective Sparks gathered her materials and prepared to leave. I'll be filing a comprehensive report about today's incident and recommending policy changes to my supervisors. Thank you for turning this unfortunate situation into an opportunity for positive change. As the detective left, Vivian Holt turned her attention back to the remaining team members. I want weekly progress reports on all implementation efforts. Mitch, you'll coordinate with HR to ensure every security guard completes the new training. Rita, you'll work with building managers across all properties to standardize the new protocols. The afternoon sun was beginning to shift, casting longer shadows across the boardroom table. Vivian Holt looked at each person present, seeing a mixture of determination and apprehension in their faces. I know this feels overwhelming, she said, her voice softening slightly, but remember why we're here. We have the power to create workplaces where everyone feels welcomed and respected. We have the responsibility to ensure that what happened to me today never happens to anyone else. CEO Weston returned to his seat, his expression resolute. We'll make this work, Vivian. The company you built deserves nothing less than complete transformation. As the meeting concluded, Vivian Holt remained in the boardroom, reviewing the termination letters one final time. Sebastian Drake and Vince Callahan had awakened something powerful in her determination to root out systemic discrimination. Their actions in the lobby had exposed a cancer that required radical treatment. The path forward would be challenging, expensive, and uncomfortable for some employees. But Vivian Holt had built her empire by refusing to accept the status quo, by pushing through barriers that others said were immovable. Today's incident had been painful, humiliating, and infuriating, but it had also been revealing, motivating, and ultimately transformative. The systematic reforms now beginning would ensure that Sterling Corporate Tower and every other Washington Enterprise property would become a model for inclusive excellence. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, but inside the boardroom, the light of change was just beginning to dawn. 6 months had passed since that fateful afternoon in the marble lobby of Sterling Corporate Tower, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The same bright afternoon sunlight that had once illuminated discrimination now streamed through the towering windows onto a scene of profound change. Where once stood guards who judged by appearance alone, now worked a diverse team of security professionals who understood that respect was the foundation of true protection. Vivian Holt stepped through the gleaming entrance doors, wearing her signature red blazer and black slacks. The same confident stride that had carried her through that humiliating ordeal, now moving her through a lobby that finally reflected her values. The security desk, once a barrier of prejudice, had become a welcoming checkpoint staffed by officers who wore their uniforms with pride and their training with purpose. Marcus Williams, the new head of security, a tall black man in his pressed long-sleeved uniform, looked up from his station with immediate recognition. "Good afternoon, Ms. Washington," he said, his voice carrying the warmth of genuine respect. "The executive team is expecting you on the 42nd floor." The simple exchange represented everything the old regime had failed to understand. Recognition came not from skin color or expensive clothing, but from competence, training, and basic human dignity. Officer Sarah Chen, standing beside him in her crisp short-sleeved uniform, added with a smile, "Mr. Garrett asked us to let him know when you arrived. Should I call up?" Vivian Holt nodded appreciatively. These weren't just employees following orders. They were professionals who understood their role in creating an environment where everyone could thrive. The contrast to Sebastian Drake and Vince Callahan's hostile interrogation couldn't have been more striking. Speaking of the former guards, their absence from the building told its own story of justice served. Sebastian Drake had spent the last 6 months submitting application after application to security firms across the city, only to find that word of his discriminatory conduct had traveled through industry networks. The documented footage of his behavior, now part of his permanent employment record, served as an unshakable barrier to finding work in any reputable organization. His former partner Vince Callahan faced similar struggles, discovering that their moment of prejudiced power had cost them their livelihoods. Both men had been forced to take minimum wage positions far from the corporate world they had once policed with such arrogance. The streets that had once felt their swagger now knew them as cautionary tales of how quickly authority abused could become authority lost. Agnes Thorne, the former building manager, who had so eagerly supported the guards' discrimination, sat in her reduced office on the 3rd floor instead of her former executive suite on the 15th. Her mandatory diversity training had been completed, but the demotion remained permanent. Every morning, she was reminded of how her willingness to enable prejudice had cost her the respect and position she had worked years to achieve. The elevator that had once been denied to Vivian Holt now carried her smoothly upward, past floors where her reforms had taken root and flourished. On the 23rd floor, former receptionist Brendan Chow, now promoted to Assistant Director of Tenant Relations, was conducting a meeting with building occupants. Her red blouse and black skirt reflected both professional success and the courage she had shown in supporting truth when it mattered most. Brenda's promotion hadn't been charity. It had been recognition of character. When others had remained silent, she had documented the incident and provided crucial witness testimony. Now she used that same integrity to ensure that every person entering the building received the respect they deserved, regardless of their appearance or assumed status. Joyce Pennington, the tenant who had dared to speak up during the confrontation, now chaired the newly established Tenant Advisory Committee. Her voice, which had been dismissed so rudely by the old security regime, now carried weight in building policy decisions. The committee met monthly, ensuring that discrimination of any kind would never again find fertile ground in Sterling Corporate Tower. The elevator opened on the 38th floor, where Detective Renee Sparks was concluding a training session with the building's security team. Still in her police uniform, she had become a regular presence, not as someone called to remove unwanted visitors, but as an educator, helping prevent the kind of discriminatory calls that had brought her to the building that day. The key principle, Detective Sparks was explaining to the attentive group, is that your job is to protect everyone equally. Bias isn't just morally wrong, it's operationally dangerous. When you make assumptions based on appearance, you miss real threats and create unnecessary conflicts. Her presentation included case studies, role-playing exercises, and most importantly, the security footage from Vivian Holt's encounter with the former guards. The video served as a powerful teaching tool, showing exactly how prejudice could blind security personnel to obvious clues and create liability for their employers. Vivian Holt continued upward to the executive floors, where the most significant changes had taken root. Alvin Garrett, her trusted executive assistant, had embraced his expanded role as Director of Diversity and Inclusion across all Washington Enterprise properties. His green shirt and blue jacket had become familiar sights in corporate boardrooms as he implemented comprehensive reforms that went far beyond simple policy changes. The transformation has exceeded our most optimistic projections, Alvin reported as Vivian Holt settled into her office, the city sprawling beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. We've seen a 40% increase in employee satisfaction scores across all properties, and tenant retention is at an all-time high. CEO Clifford Weston joined them, his orange shirt and blue jacket reflecting the energy and optimism that had characterized the company's evolution. The incident was painful, he acknowledged, but it forced us to confront systemic issues we might have otherwise overlooked. Every property in our portfolio now operates under the new protocols. The protocols weren't merely cosmetic changes or empty diversity statements. They included comprehensive bias training for all security personnel, clear escalation procedures for unusual situations, and regular audits to ensure compliance. More importantly, they established a culture where dignity and respect weren't negotiable values. Vivian Holt reviewed the quarterly reports that showed the tangible impact of these changes. Employee turnover had decreased significantly, particularly among women and people of color who had previously felt unwelcome or undervalued. Customer satisfaction surveys revealed that the respectful atmosphere created by proper training had improved everyone's experience. The ripple effects continue to spread. Alvin Garrett continued. Other property management companies are reaching out, wanting to understand our approach. We're not just changing our own organization, we're influencing industry standards. The financial results spoke as loudly as the moral ones. Properties operating under the new standards commanded higher rents and attracted more prestigious tenants. Discrimination, it turned out, wasn't just ethically wrong, it was economically stupid. Respect and inclusion weren't just moral imperatives, they were smart business practices. As the afternoon progressed, Vivian Holt walked through floors that hummed with productive energy. In conference rooms, diverse teams collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the old culture of exclusion and assumption. The building that had once judged her by her appearance now celebrated the contributions of people from every background. The legal department reported that discrimination complaints across all Washington Enterprise properties had dropped to virtually zero. The swift and decisive response to the Sterling Corporate Tower incident had sent a clear message throughout the organization. Prejudice would not be tolerated, enabled, or ignored. In the Human Resources Department, recruitment efforts had expanded to reach previously overlooked communities. The security staff now reflected the diversity of the city itself, with officers who spoke multiple languages and understood the experiences of the people they were sworn to protect. As evening approached, Vivian Holt prepared to leave the building through the same lobby where her ordeal had begun. The marble floors gleamed under the same fluorescent lighting, but everything else had fundamentally changed. The security desk buzzed with professional activity as officers processed legitimate visitors and handled routine inquiries with courtesy and efficiency. Marcus Williams approached as she waited for her car. "Miss Washington, I wanted you to know that 3 other corporations have reached out about hiring our security team. They want to understand how we've achieved such high satisfaction ratings while maintaining excellent security standards." It was validation of something Vivian Holt had always believed. Treating people with dignity didn't weaken security, it strengthened it. When people felt respected, they were more likely to cooperate, more willing to report genuine concerns, and more invested in maintaining a positive environment. The transformation extended beyond the building itself. Detective Renee Sparks had become a sought-after speaker at police departments across the state, sharing lessons learned from responding to discrimination calls. Her presentations helped officers understand how their response to such situations could either escalate conflicts or help resolve them constructively. Media coverage of the incident and its aftermath had sparked broader conversations about discrimination in corporate environments. Vivian Holt had received invitations to speak at business schools, diversity conferences, and leadership seminars. Her story had become a case study in how organizations could turn crisis into opportunity for meaningful change. Standing in the lobby where she had once been denied entry, Vivian Holt reflected on the journey from humiliation to transformation. The pain of that experience remained real, but it had catalyzed changes that would protect countless others from similar treatment. Sometimes she realized the most powerful victories emerged from the deepest injustices. Young professionals now walked through the lobby with confidence, knowing they would be judged by their character and contributions rather than their appearance. Security officers took pride in their role as guardians of dignity rather than enforcers of prejudice. The building had become what she had always envisioned, a place where excellence was recognized regardless of the package in which it arrived. As Vivian Holt's car pulled up to the entrance, she took one last look at the lobby that had been transformed from a site of discrimination into a symbol of progress. The security officers who had once barred her path were gone, replaced by professionals who understood that their true job was protecting the dignity of everyone who entered. The marble floors that had witnessed her humiliation now reflected the faces of people from every background, all treated with equal respect and consideration. The elevator that had been denied to her now carried diverse professionals to floors where their talents could flourish without the burden of prejudice. 6 months had proven that change was not only possible but profitable. The story that had begun with discrimination had evolved into a testament to the power of principled leadership and the courage to transform pain into progress. Sterling Corporate Tower now stood as proof that organizations could evolve, that justice could prevail, and that respect could become the foundation upon which true success was built. As her car pulled away from the building, Vivian Holt smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had turned a moment of personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic change. The lobby she left behind would continue welcoming everyone with dignity, ensuring that her painful experience had created lasting value for generations to come. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.